Hello, and welcome back to It's a Very Exciting Time, a podcast by a UFO nerd and his tolerant friend. My name is Scott, and I've been fascinated by the phenomenon my whole life.
Hey everyone, I'm Chuck. I'm an aerospace nerd and a tolerant friend.
We started this podcast because since 2017, there have been some shocking revelations, from news of secret Pentagon programs to confirmed Navy videos of astonishing craft. In a nutshell, now that the government has admitted that UFOs are real.
Or at least they will in 2024 if Lue Elizondo has anything to say about it.
It raises a natural question. If UFOs are real, what else? Suddenly, some of these other parts of the phenomenon that seemed unlikely are pulled into the realm of the possible.
And they may still be unlikely. But even if it's new science and not aliens...
Woo! It's a very exciting time. All right, Chuck.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so excited to be back recording with you.
Yeah, likewise.
I had a hard time putting the notes together this week, man, because I sat down and said, okay, I'm going to watch these two interviews with David Grusch, our good boy, our UAP whistleblower. And, you know, they were interesting interviews. And then I watched an interview with Chris Mellon. And then I watched an interview with Ross Coulthart. And then I watched a 4-part documentary on Netflix. Okay. And then I had to sit down and somehow translate all these things I had watched into meaningful output. Right. It was like book report time. And oh my God, I got so nervous. And literally, I had to like put little reminders to myself in the notes like, yo, you're just talking to Chuck.
Yeah. And when you first started talking about it, I was like, Scott, it doesn't sound that hard. It sounds like you watched some TV.
I did.
But now
I did. You are not wrong.
But you binged a lot of TV.
I did. And we're not even talking about half of what I watched, because I watched it and I was like, yeah, there's not really anything in here for the show.
Well, that sucks.
Like Chris Mellon, his interview was really good, but he was talking to Chris Cuomo, and like 90% of their conversation was about the extreme divisiveness of the U.S. Congress and what you can do about it. Okay. And Chris Cuomo even interrupts at one point. He's like, I know the listeners are like, what does this have to do with UFOs, buddy? Well, like, just bear with me. And he never really got there.
And they never got there. All right, good.
Yeah, it was fine. It was fine. But there was nothing I was like, oh man, I gotta tell Chuck about this.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
I get it. I've been struggling this weekend too. It's hard to pull myself off of like Cyberpunk 2077. So I'm with you.
Yeah. How are you doing with the new campaign, buddy? You got into the new stuff?
So good. So good.
Ah, man. Chuck can't say anything because he knows that I haven't started the new DLC yet, even though I started a second playthrough.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how you're multiplexing both that and Starfield right now, but
I mean, the short answer is I'm not. I'm playing Starfield, and like every now and because they're on different consoles. If someone's on the Xbox and I can't use it, I'll go out and play Cyberpunk on the PlayStation. But it breaks my brain to switch between games with different controller schemes.
Yeah.
So Starfield and Cyberpunk have totally different controller schemes, and it like I'm constantly jumping when I don't need to jump, and then I go back to the other one and I get mad. So
yeah, I get that.
It's all Starfield all the time right now, except when it can't be.
Every time you tell me you're going to go play Starfield, I get a little bit disappointed because I want to talk to you about all this shit. That's okay. That's all right. You're allowed.
It's coming. It's coming. All right. Thanks for joining us here on Scott and Chuck's Video Game Corner. Before we hashtag get to the aliens, I want to take a quick moment and remind everyone that if you are looking for show notes, you can find our complete show notes on veryexcitingtime.com, or you can support us on patreon.com/veryexcitingtime.
Yeah.
All right.
So what are we talking about today?
Well, so the first thing we're talking about before we get to my book reports.
Do we have some quick hits?
Well, kind of. We got two unrelated, well, I guess they're related. We got two quotes from Big Daddy Lue Elizondo and our goodest boy, David Grusch, talking about 2024. Lue Elizondo, for anybody who doesn't remember, because it's been a while since we talked about him, is the former director of ATIP, the oh boy, do I remember what it was. The Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which is the precursor to Arrow. If you remember,
I thought there was another one before. UAPTF? Is that before or after ATIP?
Okay. So, do you remember the 2017 New York Times article?
Yeah.
Okay, so that article was interviewing Lue Elizondo, who is director of ATIP, and they were talking about this big money Pentagon program. Confusingly, and what got a lot of people heated, and we haven't really talked about because it's kind of a nothing burger, what the program they were describing in the article was not actually ATIP. It was the precursor to ATIP called OSAP, which I don't remember what that stands for. And that was the one that Robert Bigelow was involved in. They were out at Skinwalker Ranch. They were doing a lot more investigation. When the money ran out for that one, the program was downscoped and Lue Elizondo was put in charge. And it became a purely military reporting oriented thing.
Okay.
So Lue was focused on talking to Navy pilots who had seen stuff, and he resigned because he felt that his bosses weren't taking it seriously. Okay. And ended up joining to the Stars Academy. While he was gone, they started another program called the UAP Task Force, or UAPTF, and that was running up until Congress mandated the creation of a public UFO office, which we now know and quote unquote love, AARO, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Whew, I think I got all those acronyms right.
Yeah.
There's our brief abbreviated history. So Lue Elizondo.
So hang on. You know how in the yellow pages, like you can always tell a business that's really old because they always start with AAA or A1 or something.
Yeah, Aardvark Plumbing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that's what's going on here.
A little bit. Yeah. So Lue Elizondo was the former director of ATIP, AATIP. So definitely a little bit of getting to the top of the org chart there. The previous Pentagon UFO program. He has been quiet lately. And he was very clear about this. About a year ago, he was super active on the podcast circuit, talking to everybody, and he was getting a little burned out, and the UFO community was being kind of a dick to him at the time. And he was basically like, look, I never did this because I wanted to be the public face. I did this because I thought I could do more good in public.
Right.
And around the time he was talking about him and Chris Mellon, after To the Stars kind of fell apart, they shifted their focus to lobbying in Washington. And we now know that behind the scenes, they were like meeting with Marco Rubio and Gillibrand and all the other people and trying to get them to take the topic seriously. And a lot of the legislation that has passed can be kind of directly traced to them. So Lue has been not radio silent, but not super participatory lately. So he popped back up on Twitter and said, please know that ongoing efforts are underway that will reveal themselves by early to mid 2024. At the risk of haters trying to sabotage our efforts, I can't be precise at this time. But if you've learned anything over the last 5 years, I never make empty promises. Trust me, this will be worth it.
Wow. I mean, that sounds amazing. For the two Zoomers in the audience, Scott suggested that I translate this, and and I think it goes something like, Big Daddy Lue says, "Trust, fam." But I'm like, he keeps putting these notes in for me that are like Gen Z translations, and so like just peering behind the covers, Scott writes up all the notes and then like puts some recommendations in, but he loves giving me Gen Z things, even though we're the same age, and I'm clearly the more like, I don't know, elderly in language. I don't have kids, and so like I have no idea.
You don't have a Zoomer living in your house.
Yeah, exactly. I don't. So I think he's just messing with me here.
Absolutely, I am. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
so
keep it up.
You know, in our ongoing hashtag Let Chuck Talk battle. One effort I've been taking is actively putting more points into we don't have a script, but we have healthy notes.
Yeah.
Putting points in where I'm like, Chuck should chime in around here. And sometimes I'll put a little tip for him, like, maybe you should say something like this. And yeah, I have been taking great delight in putting ridiculous words.
Yeah.
I almost got him last week to describe
That's right.
Tim Burchett as a messy bitch who loves drama. But he pulled back at the last minute.
I couldn't do it. Like, I don't even know what this means. I can't, I can't even.
I can't even. But yeah, so yeah, Big Daddy Lue, right?
Yeah.
He's back at it again. He's telling us big news coming in 2024. I don't blame anyone who looks at this and says, this is nothing.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. But Lue has earned a lot of credibility with me over the years. He does tend to predict things. Lue, notably, was the guy who about 5 years ago, when all of this was kicking off, was talking to the UFO community who were kind of demanding instant action. And he's like, listen, this is going to take some time.
Yeah.
Like, if you are the type who wants instant gratification, honestly, the best thing you could do right now would be to stop paying attention to it and go get a hobby and check back in about 5 years.
Yeah. 5 years later, we had a New York Times article, right?
No, that was around the time of the New York Times article.
Oh,
but
okay,
yeah,
right.
about 5 years later, we had UFO hearings. We had an official, UFO office. We had the whistleblower coming out. Like stuff was blowing up. And as someone was pointing out, like, man, Lou said to wait 5 years. And here we are, like, stuff's blowing up. So all that is to say, if Lou comes back and says there's big news coming in early to mid 2024, I'm inclined to think, all right,
too.
Awesome.
I think they called it on the hearings too, didn't they? Like, they called that shot last year. They said July of 2023.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
So
That's
our related quote is our good boy, David Grusch, the UAP whistleblower, former Air Force veteran, former Intel guy, can do no wrong as far as I'm concerned. I want to be clear, by the way. We get a little sarcastic sometimes in our description. I am 100% clear. When we talk about David Grusch, I'm saying good, the same way you would about a dog. I genuinely believe he is the goodest boy. He is the sweetest guy. He can do no wrong. I love him and I want only good things for him.
Yeah. The only challenge with the good boy thing is, like, it doesn't really describe the intelligence aspect. You think of a
it's a tiny bit
dopey,
patronizing, and that's the only reason I wanted to say something. I didn't want anyone to think we were talking shit about him. I love David Grusch.
He has the moral compass of a Labrador.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be clear, we're going to be talking a lot about David Grusch today because of those documentaries I watched. This is one quote from one of those documentaries, which I am pulling up because it is related to the Lou quote in that he's talking about 2024. So while he was at this gathering of people and taking questions, someone asked, like, what can we kind of expect next? And David Grusch says, what's happening next is, I know there's some intel officers and other people in and out of government that are about to file complaints similar to what I did because they said, fuck it. Quick note regarding timing. This was the day after the hearing. So since then, we have heard from Michael Schellenberger. In last week's episode, we talked about 30 to 50 additional whistleblowers who filed complaints. So Grusch was tipping his hand then. We just found this out this week, but he was talking about it the day after the hearing.
In the past. Okay.
Yeah. So he said there's a bunch of people about to file complaints, and they were on these programs. Like, these are first-hand dudes, not just people telling me stuff, but literally the dudes touching stuff. February of 2024, we should have a presidential panel on UAP disclosure, looking at the crash retrieval issue and everything. And then within 300 days of the enactment of the act, inject real fast here, I believe through context, he is talking about the Chuck Schumer disclosure amendment. We talked about this a few episodes ago, but this is a wild bit of legislation
after the quote,
includes the term non-human intelligence 27 times.
Wow. After the quote, I want to hear more about the act. I could use a rewind.
Yeah. So yeah, I believe he's talking about that. He says, within 300 days of the enactment of the act, we're going to get some kind of government statement next year on this topic. The tsunami wave is building, and I don't think we're going to totally backpedal anymore. I think 2024 is going to be, knock on wood, potentially wild in a good way.
Cool.
Right?
So, okay. Remind me of the act.
Yeah. So this is, I can't remember if it's part of the NDAA or the intelligence community AA, but either way, it's tied to one of those funding bills that always pass. And this was a bill written by Chuck Schumer and several others. Chuck Schumer is the, what is he? The majority?
Yeah, Senate Majority
Speaker,
Leader.
Majority Leader? There it is. Thank you. But the highest ranking Democrat short of the president.
Mm-hmm.
And we know through interviews and other news that has leaked that this bill was authored with the assistance of the White House. This is not Chuck Schumer going rogue. This is a guy who works in lockstep with the White House. So the White House is partly behind this bill. And the bill calls for the creation of a JFK-style disclosure process for UFO stuff.
Oh, okay.
So basically, every government agency, after the bill passes, has 300 days to get their shit together and turn over all UFO-related documents to a central department, which is going to appoint a body of people to review with the default expectation that everything will be disclosed within, I think they said 90 days or something.
Oh, wow.
Then, just like the JFK one, both the president and the panel can override that and say,
Sure.
This one deserves to stay classified for reasons.
For whatever reason, yeah.
Yeah. With the JFK thing, what happened is they say something like 95 to 99% of JFK-related documents have been released. But the 1% that remains is still 5,000 documents that continue to be classified. With every year, they have to re-up it. And the president has to re-say, yes, this is still a security threat, not to release it. And you have to ask yourself, what on earth could be in these documents that is still a security threat if it's not totally, the FBI killed him. So,
I mean, maybe that's the case. I don't know.
Maybe that's the case. But all that is to say, I don't think the Schumer Act passing automatically means we find out everything. But as we talked about at the time, the thing that's really exciting about it is it sets an expectation in law that the default stance for any document is public disclosure.
Yeah.
And you have to make a case for why it shouldn't be.
Right.
As opposed to the current situation, which is the Pentagon has said anything involving UAP is automatically classified, regardless of what it is. Which means, for example, this was one of the things that came up in the Chris Mellon interview. He said the videos that I leaked to the New York Times, which were unclassified, and I went through a ton of security reviews to see if I did anything improper, which I did not. We would not be able to release those today because they involve UAP. They would automatically be classified. That's the world we're in. And Chris says, I know the guy who wrote the bill that says all UAP things are classified. Even he agrees that was an overreaction. That things are now being improperly classified.
Oh, yeah.
So I see the Schumer Amendment as a good kind of government-wide reset on what the expectation is around UAP. Will it automatically lead to them rolling out UFOs on the front lawn of the White House and admitting that they've been holding bodies? No, of course not.
Probably
not to mention the fact that Grusch's whole allegation is that these are illegal programs that have been illegally concealed from Congress. They've already shown the contempt they feel for the ruling bodies of our nation. I don't think they're going to be like, oh, well, they passed the law. What are we going to do, guys?
Yeah.
But it gets us proper legal procedures. It sets the ground for the next stage, which I'm sure Big Daddy Lue and Chris Elizondo and Chris Mellon and all the others are thinking about what comes next. So the Schumer Amendment is very promising if it passes, which is still a big if, although the NDAA passes every year. We are currently without a Speaker of the House. We have the House of Representatives being held hostage by a number of extremely vocal Republicans who have promised to torpedo anything involving any kind of aid to Ukraine, which kind of tells you the extremist position they're taking towards things that have broad support, let alone, oh, you want to spend money on UFOs. So the battle's not over. I do think it's likely to happen. I'm optimistic about it, but I wanted to share these quotes because
it's exciting.
The community, it is exciting. And the community has been kind of concerned. Ross Coulthart especially has been very down in the dumps about like feeling like this whole thing is about to be put back in the closet. We're never going to get the answers. So we've got both Lue Elizondo and David Grusch coming out and giving optimistic statements.
Yeah.
And more importantly, being very clear about expecting a government statement on the topic next year. That seems very big to me. Yeah, I'm super excited. So obviously this is just two dudes talking. They are not soothsayers any more than we are.
They're well informed.
I think it's worth talking about.
Yeah. So I Googled the Schumer Act and this came up like right up, and it could be that Google knows me, but I wonder how Schumer feels about like, this is his Obamacare. Like,
Schumer actually has been really clear about it. He has given a statement a few times about his legislative priorities for the coming year. And it was, oh God, let's see if I can remember right. It was two things you would expect. It was like immigration, medical reform, and then it was AI and UFOs.
Wow.
Like, he's not being subtle about it. He had not really spoken on the topic at all. And then he suddenly came out with the Schumer amendment and was like all in. So surprising, but very welcome.
Yeah, right. Okay, cool.
All right. Let's you ready to talk about these documentaries, buddy?
Oh, yeah, let's stretch. Get in there. Let's tuck in.
Okay, so I mentioned last week that a documentary on David Grusch had just dropped, but I wasn't watching it because another one was dropping like the day after we recorded. So yes, these two documentaries dropped about a week apart. Having watched both of them now, I can tell you that they cover 80% of the same ground and indeed include almost the same footage. They take a slightly different bent. The reason for that is because they were filmed by two buddies with two different YouTube channels who got permission as a team to follow David Grusch around for a week after the hearing.
Okay.
Now, the material covered in these documentaries is great, but it's a little frustrating that it's like spread across two different videos, one of which is 2 hours long and one of which is an hour and a half long.
Wow.
And they have a fairly healthy amount of overlapping shared footage because they were at the same places.
Right.
The first is from a guy named Jesse Michaels, I believe that's right. Got the thing right here in my show notes. Why am I making it? Yeah, Jesse Michaels. Who is, I hadn't heard of him, but he is a big UFO dude. He talks about this all the time. He's screened him, I think, as American Alchemy on YouTube. And his documentary was much more him talking to the camera, interspersed with footage of him talking to David Grusch.
Okay.
And his kind of story is basically like, I've been super into this topic for years. I'm weirdly well connected with everybody. I know David Grusch personally and have for about 3 years now. And I asked him if I could make a documentary and he agreed. So his presentation is kind of like, I'm talking to David Grusch about this. The title of his documentary was UFO whistleblower David Grusch tells me everything. And a few people on Twitter, of course, got a little snarky. He didn't tell him everything. He, in fact, told him nothing new.
Very little. Yeah.
But, it was good.
Wait, hang on. Let's rewind.
Go ahead.
You have other show notes? Do you have another show notes doc? Or were you looking at the references section?
I was looking at the references section.
Okay. It's like, oh my God, how deep does it go? It's turtles all the way down. All right, carry on.
It's all turtles. Yeah. It's okay. Like the bottom 3 layers are all written by AI. I'm not even here right now. I've carefully programmed a Python script to throw out a few insults and not let Chuck talk, and nobody's ever noticed.
Nobody's noticed. Even Chuck hasn't noticed. Well, Scott hasn't noticed that I'm also an AI. Oh, God, the future.
Oh, boy. All right. So, yeah, the other video was from a channel called Yes Theory, who have a pretty big following, and they have done a couple of UFO-related videos in the past. One of the hosts of Yes Theory is friends with Jesse Michaels and is also a big believer in the UFO thing. So they both got permission to follow him around. And this is why they cover most of the same topic.
Yeah.
What's interesting is, although there isn't a whole lot of like new information in these documentaries, they do a very good job of presenting David Grusch as a human. So where we have seen David Grusch is giving testimony to Congress in a kind of hardcore journalism style interview with Ross Coulthart,
right,
and in articles being interviewed. These videos were surrounding him going to testify in Congress. So a lot of it is like them picking him up at the airport, getting in a car and driving him to, the center of DC, them getting on an airplane with him after the testimony and flying back to his home in Colorado, them going on a hike with him. The Yes Theory guys put out a call to a bunch of their fans with no details and just said, if you're interested in UFOs, show up here.
Oh my God.
And 20, 30 people did. And they held a public forum with David Grusch the day after the theory. Then they flew back to his house in Colorado.
Oh my God, that's wild.
Jesse has a big interview with him on his patio. They go on a hike with him. So the footage is kind of clips from all these moments they spent with him over the days.
Yeah.
But as a result, Grusch is much more at ease.
Yeah.
It's not a 2-hour intense period sitting down with a journalist who you barely know. It's hanging out with guys that he apparently knows and talking about the same stuff, but a little more casually, a little more easygoing. And Grusch is still very careful about what he can and can't say. But I will say I've really liked getting to see the kind of human side of him.
Yeah, that's super smart. I feel like it's so much harder to dismiss someone if they're a real live person, and seeing that kind of side of them chilling on a porch, barbecuing or whatever.
Petting their dogs. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's super. Did he call any of the dogs good boys? Because that would be amazing.
He did not. That would have been really funny. So I will say there is one thing I will say to any of our listeners. I personally, as an individual, found these videos very difficult to watch, especially the Yes Theory one, because the Yes Theory guys follow this new kind of Mr. Beast vibe. A lot of it's not one dude, it's a team of dudes on camera and they're getting each other hyped. We're going out, we're going to talk to David Grusch. And Grusch will step off camera and they'll all turn around and debrief whoa, can you believe we heard that? That's really wild, dude. And there's a whole yo, I know this is crazy, but this guy says there are UFOs and aliens. Let's talk about it. And the one thing I will say, our discussion about NASA the other week actually really helped me, because I was able to just kind of keep reminding myself, I am not the target audience for these videos.
Yeah.
The target audience for the videos is Zoomers and kids who watch Mr. Beast and Yes Theory, who may be new to the topic. And given that context, I think it was very good. I think it was very good at kind of addressing their audience on their terms and, presenting the fact yo, this guy was testifying to Congress. That's a big deal. And then we went and talked with him and here are the things he said. And isn't this wild? So
Okay.
While I find that vibe kind of exhausting, it's probably very good for the audience they were aimed
So
at.
I'm super curious, like, without talking details about your kiddos, did you watch it with your kiddos?
No.
my
No.
That would have been amazing. I would love to hear
My-
their thoughts.
So I think everybody knows we kind of joke about Annie on the show, my wife, who, you know, she's not necessarily a believer. She's not necessarily a skeptic.
Yeah.
I think she just doesn't really think about it much. And she certainly
Yeah.
doesn't want to
So the
spend,
majority there.
you know, hours a week thinking about it or talking about it.
Yeah.
So she's very grateful that I have a podcast where I can get it out. What I will say is she has started listening to the show. Hey, babe, how you doing?
Erica has definitely not started.
I got in the car the other day and she turned it on and like my voice comes booming out of the speakers.
Oh my gosh. That's such a huge honor.
It was hilarious. But yeah, my kids, John he's 10. He just thinks it's hilarious that I have a YouTube channel. He's never watched any of it. He doesn't care. Ollie is aware that I have a YouTube channel and what the topic is. They will listen to me talk about UFOs a little bit, and they claim that their friends are interested and may have watched some of the videos.
Oh,
I don't know if that's true. Hey,
interesting.
how you guys doing?
Hi, friends.
But yeah, I think for the most part, they don't watch it. They will come in and they're like, what are you watching? I'm like, it's a UFO documentary. And they just kind of like roll their eyes and move on.
Okay. Meta note. We can talk about this after, but do you want me to bleep names? Are you cool with that?
No, I think it's fine.
Okay, cool. All right.
Did I say a name I shouldn't have?
No, I know some creators don't like talking about their kids' names, and it's not like we're
it's fine.
famous or anyone like.
No.
Yeah.
I may regret that someday, but it's fine right now. Now, Chuck, you are trying to play it cool here, but I know when we were prepping for the show, you were like, who's Mr. Beast?
Oh yeah, no, I have no idea who you're talking about right now. But I think as you were talking, I kind of got the idea.
Yeah.
He's like Mark Rober does a little of this too, right? Or is it totally different?
Yeah, it's a different style, but it's similar vibe. It's really like hype house style. We're going to put out a viral video every week. Every video has to top the last one. Insane stunts, gathering people, going crazy places, doing extreme things.
Okay.
I don't know. I just find the whole thing very exhausting.
Yeah, no, I've got a couple YouTube folks that I used to watch, but they started going that direction, and now I'm just like, I can't deal.
Right.
Like, I definitely do want to see you try and jump over a barn in those stupid shoes, but I can't deal with the video.
With the 45 minutes of build up around whether you succeed or not.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
No, I mean, 90% of my YouTube subscriptions are like renovating a house or like building a log cabin in the Canadian wilderness with like no audio. It's just like a dude and his dog in the woods doing woodworking stuff.
I mean, yeah.
It's all escapism.
90% of mine are watching a city planner play City Skylines. So, right there with you.
Nice. Okay, so let's talk about in the videos. Although there was not a lot of new material, there were a number of quotes that I thought were interesting. Now, these are talking about things we already know about, but maybe coming at it from a different angle or with a little more detail that I thought was really informative.
Okay.
The first one was, and this is something we've heard the community theorize about, but it was good to hear it straight from David Grusch. They asked him, why was your Dopser approved? Like, why can you talk to us about this stuff at all?
Wait, what's Dopser?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Before anybody in intelligence or anything like that is allowed to talk to the public at all. Like, you're writing a fiction book. I don't care what it is. If you're going to talk to the public, you have to go through, I think it's the Defense Department Office of Pre-Publication Security Review, something like that. But basically, there's a group whose job is to look at what you say you're going to talk about and figure out if you're violating national security. Now, we've talked before about we don't know how that works.
Right.
Does this office itself have access to all secrets so they can evaluate it? And the answer, I found out from David Grusch, is no. This is the office that's responsible for coordinating getting other agencies to review it.
Okay.
So, when asked why his Dopser was approved at all, Grusch says it was a catch-22. Otherwise, they would have to self-identify and highlight their concerns in order to redact. So, the office who would oppose, whatever I'm saying, say it's a 3-letter agency or whatever, they would have to self-acknowledge. So I think when I submitted that, they had a choice, right? Either we try to sequester Dave's ability to speak publicly and try to tell him no, but then we'd have to give him a reason and tell him what organization said no. And if it got redacted like that, and it cited what organization and what security reason it is, I would just publish that. And then the public can make its own interpretation about why, the U.S. government is withholding information about that kind of thing and wanted to sequester my speech.
Whoa. Okay. That's so fascinating. It sounds like Grusch kind of painted them into a corner in that way. Mm-hmm. That's so cool.
Yeah. And there's a related point here, which we actually mentioned in our first David Grusch episode, which Kelly Chase of the UFO Rabbit Hole podcast made, which is another thing is people are annoyed that that Grusch isn't a first-hand witness. But it's worth noting that if Grusch was a first-hand witness, he would not have been able to go public with it because he would have signed an NDA.
Sure.
The fact that he was not granted access to these programs, which is what his complaint was about, is also the thing that lets him go public with it. If he had been granted access, he would have had to sign an NDA and would not legally be able to talk about it.
Yeah, right.
So it's another catch-22. We can't let him in because he's a security risk, but by not letting him in, we're also not able to tell him not to talk about it without tipping our hand that the program exists.
My gosh.
So,
okay.
Yeah, and you can make your own decision about whether David Grusch is, a 3D chess mastermind or whether he's got guys like Chris Mellon in his corner backing him up.
Right.
But I just thought it's really interesting that whoever's plan it was, Grusch went to them intentionally, knowing that no matter what happens with the Dopser, it serves his agenda. He's able to move forward with talking about this and saying, the government is hiding stuff.
So I wonder if this was kind of a unique position for someone to have that much knowledge, but not have signed all the NDAs.
I really think it is.
Yeah. Huh. So I wonder if...
And we'll talk about that a little more later, but I think Grusch really was kind of a curveball to them. Like he kind of came out of nowhere and their processes were not really prepared to deal with someone who wasn't going to be intimidated into backing down.
Right. So I wonder if Chris Mellon and Lue Elizondo saw this and they're like, oh, okay. Like maybe they go back even further to when he was just starting and they're like, hey, make sure you don't sign any NDAs or something.
I wouldn't be surprised. Honest to God, I wouldn't be.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, because we know that it was all happening around the same time, right? Like Lue quit the program in 2017 and in 2020, Grusch was starting to dig into this stuff and run into problems. Right. So I would not be surprised at all if he was talking to Lue and those guys.
Yeah, I would be. Talk to the previous program people as much as you can. Wow, that's so interesting. Okay.
Another thing that came up, which we've talked about before, right? A common objection to what Grusch claims is a program of this magnitude. There is no way it would stay secret, right? It would leak. We would know about it. We would have heard about it. There's no way this could possibly happen. Well, ignoring the obvious example of the freaking Manhattan Project, which we've talked about before, Grusch addressed this directly. He said, people are like, oh, dude, wouldn't it be broadly leaked or whatever? And I'm like, as someone who is super cleared to a lot of that conventional stuff over the years, stuff never leaks. It does not come out. There are plenty of things that are pretty serious, that are broad, that are global, that have never seen the light of day.
Oh, okay. This is so cool. Like I've heard the other statement, like, why, of course it would have leaked or whatever, but it contrasted with other things. I remember watching YouTube recently about Project Iceworm, which was in 1960. And this was a covert operation where they went to the ice sheets of Greenland, and the goal was to install like a nuclear missile silo, but it's the ice sheets of Greenland, so they also needed to install, a nuclear reactor and enough of a town to keep 200 people stationed there at all times. Also, they needed some side projects to make it look like it wasn't a military operation, so they created 2 other facilities nearby, one called Camp Century or something, and this all like fell apart in, I think, 66 when they realized the ice sheets were all melting. But oh yeah, and Denmark didn't know about this. Denmark did not know that America was building a nuclear military base on their territory. They didn't get approval from Denmark. Anyways, so we only found out about it 35 years later in 95 when Denmark declassified a whole bunch of things, and there was one like complaint letter or something.
Some local, my reindeer hunting spot is filled with a bunch of Americans in jeeps.
Right. Yeah. But this was supposed to involve thousands of people. And so, I mean, clearly they can keep shit secret.
Right. Yeah, it's one of these things, like, my dad used to say that he didn't believe in UFOs because, as a government employee, he didn't believe the government was capable of keeping a secret. And I used to put a lot of stock in that, and I think I have come around the other side. 2 things. One, as Grusch says, and as we have seen, secret projects do exist and are kept very well. 2, it is made very clear that this secret in particular is not kept the way other secrets are kept, right? If you're like on, the B-2 bomber group, there's a standard degree of secrecy and consequences around leaking it. Chris Mellon, actually, another point he made in his thing, he's like, do you know how many people have been arrested for, like, being spies, for leaking secrets? And Chris Mellon was like, no. He's like, over 100 every year.
Wow.
Like, this is really common to catch spies. And these aren't like little spies. These are people who were well installed and had access to real secrets. One of them made the news a few years ago where they actually had access to all of the names of our assets overseas who were now at risk and had to be recalled, things like that. Oh my
gosh.
So, like, secrets absolutely are kept, and there is a whole industry around it. But the way that the secret is kept on the program, what we hear about this is another level above. Like, it is made very clear, like, it's not that you're going to go to prison. It's that you're going to disappear.
Yeah.
Your body's going to end up in the middle of the desert and no one will ever find it. Like, you just don't get to talk about this. And third, it has leaked.
Yeah, it has leaked
over and over. And every time someone's like, oh, it would leak. Like, yes, it has leaked. We're talking about it now.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Like, yeah, we don't know for sure whether it exists. We don't know. But, like, over and over and over the years, we have people coming forward, writing books, giving speeches, talking about it. Yeah. Some percentage of them are disinfo agents. Some percentage of them are grifters. But the broad shape of what this looks like has leaked many, many times. So, anyway, it's complicated.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I like Grusch pointing out that it is actually very common for top secret stuff to not leak. These programs, the government does know how to keep a secret.
Right. And people really do care about, like, I feel like people who are in the government and have top secret clearances, like, they don't want to go to jail, but also they really do care.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And Lue Elizondo, Chris Mellon, David Grusch, all of them continually echo this line. The people in these programs, the people working in the government, even if you disagree about whether or not this should be kept secret, these people are patriots. They're doing what they do because they believe it is right. They are doing what they do because they believe it is in the best interests of the country. There's room to debate about whether they're going about it the right way.
Right.
But nobody is questioning, we're not dealing with mustache twirling villains. These are people who believe they're doing the best thing for the country.
And at this point, it seems like I'm reflecting now that what Chris Mellon and Lue Elizondo have been doing, and everyone in this, is not just reducing the stigma, but also making it apparent to the people that do have secrets that maybe that isn't the patriotic thing to do anymore.
Yeah.
That's big.
Yeah. And, this is a perfect glide into our next quote. So one of the things Grusch talks about is the people who were coming to talk to him, why were they talking to him? And he said, frankly, a lot of them don't think it should be kept secret. And the problem with this kind of program is you don't find out what you're being signed up for until you've already signed the non-disclosure.
Oh,
Someone will
shit.
come to you and say, we want you to be part of this program. Well, what's the program about? Well, you got to sign the non-NDA first. And then you sign it, and suddenly you're getting all this heavy-duty shit about how they're going to shoot you and leave you in the desert. And you can never tell your wife or children or anything. So Grusch says, they're like, look, dude, you're not getting promoted. You're going to lose your job. The psychology of the typical career government worker, right? Stable paycheck, pension, maintain clearance. So if any of that's threatened, they're going to capitulate in most cases, right? The threatening nature of some of their indoctrinations, where they're like, this is treason. You're going to Leavenworth if you ever tell anybody not in the program. And oh, by the way, what's the penalty for treason? Oh, right. Execution.
Yeah. Shit, that sounds awful. Like,
yeah.
And I think there's that, you talked about that second layer too. There's also the discrediting layer. Like, you're not just going to be disappeared. You're also going, all of your work will be discredited. Your family will be destroyed. It's like,
yeah, you will be publicly destroyed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there is an element here of, broadly speaking, these people are patriots who believe they're in the right place, doing the right thing. Then they get put into this program, and maybe once they're in it and it's too late to leave, they find out that they don't like what's being done and how it's being handled.
Right.
And this can range from the more mundane side of it, Lue Elizondo and others have talked for years about the idea that they believe, and the Wilson memo, that the program is only able to bring in so many people in order to keep it secret, which means as a scientist, you can't do good science. If you get stuck, you can't go out into the community. You can't ask other people for their opinions. It's the four people in the room with you. And if the four of you are stuck, well, okay, put it back in a box and we'll put it on ice for a few years.
It just occurred to me, you probably can't even Google things.
No.
Can you imagine trying to do your work?
Air-gapped computers and stuff. Yeah.
Imagine doing your work without Google or Stack Overflow or anything. That's just wild.
Yeah, and that's the more mundane side of it, where you're just like, this is being mismanaged in the sense that we could do better if it was public.
Yeah.
All the way up to the more extreme. This shouldn't be secret in the first place. Right. This is a world-changing revelation, and it is immoral to keep it from people. And all the way up to some of these people have found out, Grusch has explicitly claimed, people have been murdered to keep this secret. Not necessarily judicial, yes, we held a trial and you were found guilty of treason. Just straight up, that dude was driven out into the desert and shot in the head. And that's it. Nobody ever heard from him.
Oh,
again.
wow. Yeah.
If that's the level of stuff we're dealing with, any one of those would be a good reason to feel like maybe this program isn't being managed the way it should, and maybe I should go to the whistleblower. So it gives you a little bit more insight into why, Grusch said he talked to 40 people. We're hearing 30 to 50 whistleblowers are coming forward. we have been hearing for a while that, you know, like they were going to be watching how Grusch was treated to see if it is safe to come forward. And the overwhelming vibe from the people we trust and care about was that the congressional hearing was a huge success for one reason. Grusch was taken seriously. He wasn't killed. He wasn't discredited. He was able to come in and talk.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a whistleblower considering coming forward, you're watching that testimony going, okay, maybe I can do this. Nobody wants to be the first. And Grusch kind of makes this point. He's talking to these people and they're telling him these things. He's like, okay, well, I guess I can be the one.
Yeah.
I can be the one who breaks the ice, who goes out there and gets things started. And that's why he's able to come out and say, no, I wasn't a first-hand witness to the program. That's why I'm able to talk to you publicly.
Right.
But all these other people who are, I got them all to talk to the ICIG. I got them all to talk to Congress. I got them to follow the proper procedure behind the scenes that isn't public, but is still moving it forward.
Right.
So, like
That's
I said,
cool.
none of this is news. None of this is new information, but I think it's really helpful to Grusch kind of outline, like, why would these people come forward at all? If these people are patriots who are willing members of the program, why would they whistleblow? Why, you know, you would think they're all on board. Well, there's good reasons why you might be on board, but not necessarily like convinced this is being handled the best way.
Yeah. I also wonder if they're even on board at this point. Like, are they willing participants? Can you leave?
Yeah, that's a
know.
bigger question. So the last thing I wanted to talk about, this is a topic that's kind of near and dear to my heart. Grusch revealed that he has been diagnosed with autism. And, you know, a few people kind of used that to slam him, but for the most part, it kind of came out without comment. So one of the dudes that was interviewing him asked him, how has your autism helped you or hindered you in your professional career? And his answer was fascinating. He said, I didn't know I was autistic until I was in my early 30s. I mean, I always wondered why in my personal life, if I get fixated on something and obsessed, what was going on with that. I mean, it served me well in the government because I was super good at doing intel. They'd come to me like, Dave, we want you to target this facility. You have 6 months, figure out everything. And I do. And that was good. But I think it obviously causes me to be very detail oriented. I want to always tell the truth. My instinct is to just say it as it is. I have to. I have no filter.
Yeah.
And at this point, one of the guys chimes in. He says, do you think the fact that you were neurodivergent was a curveball to them? Like, because your response is so different than others who might be pressured to stop looking and go away. And Grusch goes, yeah, absolutely. I think my response is so analytical. I didn't even think about it emotionally. My divergence really helped keep the train on the tracks looking at this stuff. They didn't consider my zest to continue the mission because once you get me going, it's hard to put the brakes on the train.
Oh my God. He even referenced a train there. Amazing.
Oh my God. As a parent of 2 kids on the spectrum, man, I am cracking up at the idea that they just did not know who they were fucking with. Hey, Grusch, go find out whether there are any secret UFO programs. Okay. I found some. Oh, whoa. No, don't actually go do them.
That's too many.
You mean, go do them. You already told me to go find them. I can't stop now.
Yeah, you've already. I am just delighted that he invoked trains because that's such a thing. So for me, I am also neurodivergent. And I usually think about it as like a different CPU architecture. There's nothing good or bad about ADHD, autism. They're just different. You write code for like a monolithic CPU and run it on a distributed ADHD brain. It's not going to go well. But man, when you write good distributed code, just like watch us outcompete any normie out there. I love it. I'm sure autism is the same way. I don't know what architecture that is, but I'm sure it's the same. You just gotta do it right for the people. That's so good. Yeah.
So those are the David Grusch quotes. Like I said, nothing here is new. But
No.
I kind of love this picture they're painting of David Grusch was kind of a perfect storm of things that this system, which works very well at keeping the secret,
Right.
was not designed to accommodate.
Yeah.
Hey, like, here's a guy who was denied access. In hindsight, that was a mistake. Then they told him to stop looking and tried to, like, take away his security clearances by punishing him for having PTSD. That was a mistake. He fought that tooth and nail.
Mm-hmm.
He goes to one inspector general and files a whistleblower complaint. They try to retaliate against him. He escalates to a different inspector general, and then he quits and goes public and tells them, this is what I'm going to say to the public. Call my bluff.
Yeah, right?
Like, it's just like everything in the system was designed around someone who would recognize the signs that, yo, you gotta stop.
Yeah. But that's not what we do. I love
That
it.
ain't him.
Oh man, I hope he goes down as like autism hero.
I hope so too. Yeah,
like,
he's such a good boy.
Good boy.
Our good boy. All right, let's pivot a little bit. Let's talk about my other book report. Netflix
All right.
has a new documentary, I don't know, mini series. It's 4-hour-long episodes.
Okay.
It's called Encounters. Now, you may or may not be aware of this, but whenever a new UFO documentary or film or even like movie that fictional movie comes out, the UFO community is all over it. Like, trying to figure out, is it good? Are they kind of on our side? Are they skeptical? Are they just coasting the wave?
Okay.
And most documentaries especially tend to get slammed for a couple of reasons.
Okay.
One, they will get slammed as nothing new. Like, there is a market for making a new documentary that kind of like sums up the current state of affairs and isn't addressed at people deep in the community, but is addressed at new people who are kind of on the fence about it. But the UFO community tends to be a little bit hostile to them, even though these things are very useful.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, there's a vibe sometimes that the people making the documentary don't take it seriously.
Yeah.
This can manifest as like X-Files music, or the witnesses are presented in a way that makes them seem kind of laughable, or they give way more screen time to debunkers and skeptics in the interest of maintaining neutrality.
Right. Yeah.
So all that said, I wanted to watch this series and see what it's like. The kind of premise of it is it's focused on eyewitness accounts. So there was not a lot of, here is what happened. It was examining 4 mass sightings. So each of these was many witnesses. And whenever possible, they would kind of put it up on a map. They'd be like, here was Sarah's sighting, here's Bob's sighting, here's Jeff's sighting. And you could see that,
fun.
Based on what they're saying, the UFO kind of came down the coast here and, hit all these people in a row. And they supported each other in the following ways. So I don't want to like spend too much time on this, but I'd like to kind of just quickly go through the 4 episodes, the 4 incidents, and just kind of briefly talk about them. And then we can kind of talk about the series as a whole.
Sounds good.
So episode 1 was called Messengers. By the way, I have no idea where some of these episode titles came from. As far as I can tell, there were no messengers in the Messengers episode. I don't know. But it was covering a mass sighting in 2008 of strange lights in the sky in central Texas. This actually got a bunch of media attention at the time, and also, as you might expect, a lot of ridicule.
Yeah.
But they were able to get radar data that confirmed what the witnesses were saying.
Very cool.
So they spoke to a number of eyewitnesses in the area, including a police officer. What are you laughing at?
Sorry. You said a number of. My favorite comedian does a bit about the number of supermodels that have expressed interest in dating him. That number is 0, but still a number of supermodels.
All right. A non-zero number of witnesses.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Were interviewed. I guess that doesn't help because it can still be one.
Yeah, all right.
All right. Anyway, they spoke to many. Witnesses. Most interestingly, they spoke to a MUFON investigator. MUFON is the Mutual UFO Network. They are arguably the biggest civilian UFO investigatory body. It is very common if you have a sighting to file a witness report with MUFON.
Okay.
And they have a big centralized database of this. And in fact, the way this guy found out about it is he's like, I was sitting in the office watching the incoming reports. And it's like, here's a slew of like a dozen of them from this one area in Texas. I'm like, okay. So he gets on a plane. He flies out to Texas. He speaks to a bunch of people. And he sets up a public meeting. Now, this is kind of a common thing they do. Okay. If there's more than one person in an area who had a sighting, they will hold a public meeting. They'll put it in the paper and like, yo, if you saw any strange lights or anything like that, MUFON is holding a public meeting at, the Grange Hall at 2:00 on Saturday or whatever. So
very specific.
One of the guys says, the MUFON guy said, yeah, 35 is probably max. I don't know if we've ever had that many people show up. So we set out like 30, 40 chairs, and then we opened the door and the entire town came in.
Oh my gosh.
And they cut to a bunch of media clips from the time. And one of the journalists is like, over 500 people are here to talk to MUFON. He mentions that people were showing up, taking one look at the crowd, and leaving.
Yeah.
So 500 people is the number of people who saw it and decided to stick around.
Oh my gosh.
Which means there are more people.
Yeah.
So they had to tell this story. And of course, you can't talk to 500 people. So They spoke to the MUFON guy. They spoke to a handful of witnesses. But the thing that was really interesting is the MUFON guy was able to file a Freedom of Information request to the FAA for the radar data at the time. And he worked with a radar technician, and they were able to confirm, witness A said he saw the lights fly over his farm at this time of night, and they departed to the northeast. And we look, and hey, here's this object, and it goes to the northeast. And then this person up here says they saw it, and it headed west.
So cool.
And they're able to draw this track of it, zipping around the area, buzzing all the locals.
Wow.
Yeah, so very strange, very interesting. The thing that was most interesting about this episode was just the scale of it.
Yeah.
Basically everyone in this region in Texas saw these lights in the sky. And, some of them described it differently. One guy described a flying Dorito. Giant triangle-shaped crafts are a common description.
Okay.
Dorito is an interesting take on it, but it works. Other people just described orbs. Some people described orbs coming together and falling apart, which is something we commonly hear. So it wasn't like everyone saw a silver disc and it did this. Different people saw different things, but there is matching radar data. There are hundreds of witnesses. So very interesting episode. And that was a story I had not heard about before.
Okay, so first, I have two questions. How has MUFON not come up before? This sounds amazing.
We, on this show, don't talk a lot about the kind of classic UFO stuff. MUFON is, I think of them as a little old school. They're not. They're still around. But it's one of those things, if you spend any time in the community, you're going to run into mentions of MUFON. We also haven't talked about Project Blue Book other than briefly. There's a lot of history in this field that we haven't really dug into, and MUFON is part of that. They are still an active group, but they have kind of gone through periods of greater and lesser respectability. And it's not that I don't respect them, but they are not at the cutting edge of the topics that we're talking about it. We tend to come at it, and this is my own bias showing, because this was how I came to find the topic compelling and convincing, as opposed to something I was kind of tee-hee interested in. Was the New York Times article and, quote unquote, serious witnesses from the military, government involvement, finding out that there's some some real meat behind these claims, where
Right.
MUFON has always been an eyewitness organization.
Okay.
And so necessarily you're dealing with messier data. You're dealing with individuals, you're dealing with stories, you're dealing with recollections. You know, it's complicated. So we just haven't talked about it a lot. But
Okay.
yeah, I don't have any negative feelings towards them. It doesn't necessarily overlap with the type of UFO stuff we tend to talk about.
So, okay, here's my second question. Have you ever considered becoming a MUFON field investigator? And would you
Oh my
enjoy
God.
this?
I mean, bluntly, no, because I don't like going anywhere or talking to people. But yes, because who wouldn't want to be more involved, you know? And actually, there is another UFO podcast I listen to, and the host is a MUFON field investigator. And like, you know, he's always proud to talk about it. Like, oh, I'm Roderick, and, you know, I'm a MUFON field investigator. Like,
I feel like you should do this, or at least you should take the certification training course.
yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not going to go so far as to dare you, but I think this would be really amusing. And I would love to know.
Oh man, you would be astonished at how little being dared to do something motivates me to do it. Like, I am happy to fail a dare. Oh no.
No. All right. I always forget that pride isn't your weakness.
Oh boy. Moving right along.
I mean, that wasn't meant as a judgment. I have friends for whom it is.
Episode 2, which is titled Believers,
Okay.
which is still a weird topic, but it
Yeah.
kind of works for this one,
Kind of.
is about, if anybody is familiar with the Ariel School incident in rural Zimbabwe. I actually don't want to talk about this too much because
Okay.
this is something we have been meaning to talk
Yeah.
about since we started the podcast.
Okay, so it's
I've
that one.
threatened to bring it up a number of times, and I still think we should.
A
But
non-zero number.
the short version is this is a very famous case. It was in rural Zimbabwe at a Christian school, private school.
Okay.
Over 60 children witnessed a UFO land in the adjacent field. They saw beings come out of the craft. Some of the children communicated telepathically with the aliens, and the children they don't tell exactly the same story, but you know, you have to make a little bit of allowance for the fact that these are literal grade school children of various ages,
Yeah,
from
right.
like 6 to 12. But they tell a remarkably consistent story. And over because this was 1994, over the 30 years since, very, very stuck to their story for the most part. Very few have dropped out or recanted. Most of them still very much stick by it, tell things the same way. Interestingly, this incident intersects with John Mack's story, which is another thing I've been wanting to talk about. This was when he was beginning to speak with experiencers and struggling with public reactions and
Wait,
stuff.
who's John Mack?
Oh boy, Chuck, I have failed you.
Okay.
John Mack is a Harvard psychiatrist. He literally founded the Harvard psychiatry school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He's very well regarded, very well respected in the field. And late in his career, he started talking to abductees and taking their claims seriously. And this went extremely poorly for him. The field of psychiatry broadly believed that John Mack himself had lost his mind. Harvard tried to take away his tenure on the basis that he was conducting malpractice by encouraging them in their beliefs instead of telling them they were psychotic.
Wow.
And John Mack's argument the whole time was these people are clinically not mentally disturbed. They
Sure.
are not. They exhibit no signs of psychosis or derangement. What they do have is PTSD.
Sure.
To a person. These people have experienced something that traumatized them. So yeah, his whole thing was kind of talking about that. In the end, they were not able to take away his tenure. Unfortunately, shortly after that whole incident, he was killed by a drunk driver. So yeah, John Mack, he, is talking to abductees. It's starting to have negative impacts on his career. But in the middle of this whole thing, he actually flew to Zimbabwe and interviewed these children. Wow. And importantly, John Mack believed them. And he met with parents and people in the neighborhood who thought it was nonsense and didn't understand why all these Westerners were flying in to talk to their kids. And there's footage of him talking to the people at the school who are very dismissive of the children. They're like, no, nothing happened. Kids lie. And John's like, these kids aren't lying. They experienced something. One of the reasons people have been skeptical about it over the years is no adults were present.
Yeah. I mean,
all of the kids were out at recess and all of the teachers were having a staff meeting inside. So it was one of those very convenient things. All the kids come in afterwards and they're telling the teachers, we saw a UFO, and the teachers are like, yeah, whatever, sit down and shut up.
Yeah.
There were a couple of interesting bits in this documentary. One is one of the children is now recanting his claims.
Okay.
This kid named Dallin. And the story he tells in this episode is, I personally made the whole thing up. I was bored. I didn't want to go to my language lessons. And I said, yo, do you see that silver thing in the craft? And then all the other kids started repeating the story. You know how little kids are. And he's very like, I don't know why everybody else is sticking to this story, but I'm here to tell you it's bullshit. And everybody else needs to think about what they've done. But as recently as 2018, he was interviewed for the big Ariel School documentary that came out and was still very much like, yes, I saw this. I was there. I was part of it. Now, I don't know what he experienced.
Yeah, right.
Did he never see anything and he was just coasting it for celebrity? Did he make the whole thing up and all the other kids are lying? Or has he been pressured in some way? Does he just regret the celebrity that has come with it? I have no way of knowing. But what I will say is none of the other children have done that. And all of them are aware of the fact that he is telling the camera crew that he doesn't believe it. And all of them are like, I don't know why he's saying that, but he was there with us. He saw it. We all saw it. I'm not backing down. So that's a weird, interesting thing. But the other thing that's interesting is the headmistress of the school, who previously was very hands-off about the thing.
Yeah.
In this documentary, it comes out and admits that she had her own experiences at the time.
Oh, no way. Okay.
With like people coming into her room at night and stuff. So,
okay.
Like I said, there's a whole thing to discuss here. The Ariel School incident is really interesting. There is a documentary on this. The documentary is called The Ariel Phenomenon. That's Ariel. Okay. Ariel Phenomenon by Randall Nickerson. Came out in 2022. Very good documentary.
Okay.
Talks about John Mack and his experiences there. Highly recommend it. But like I said, we will almost certainly be talking about this in a future episode.
Okay, great.
The third episode was another incident that I had not heard of. This was the Broadhaven Triangle. This was back in the 70s. It was a close encounter at a children's school in a Welsh village, which turned into a series of sightings in the area. Now, if I was making a documentary and episode 2 was about a group of kids who saw aliens.
Yeah.
And then episode 3 was also about a school where kids saw aliens, I would be a little hesitant. Like, yeah, we're kind of covering the same ground. But this episode added some interesting elements, which is, in addition to the children seeing a flying saucer and perhaps an alien at the school, people in the surrounding area began having encounters. They would see the craft, and notably, they would see beings. A number of families reported being terrorized by these 7 to 8 foot tall, faceless aliens wearing silver suits. this is a buck wild claim, and 7 to 8 foot tall faceless aliens in silver suits is not one of the kind of like classic alien races we hear about, right? Like you regularly hear about gray aliens, you regularly hear about these kind of like mantis aliens. We hear about Nordics, who are basically, you know, beautiful tall blonde humanoids. There are a number of kind of like quote unquote classic alien races. This is not one of them. I haven't heard this anywhere. One kid tells this story about like biking down a road or walking down a road, and he looks up and this like really tall, like 7 foot thing steps out of the bushes and is looking at him, and he freaks out and runs away, and it like pursues him up the lane.
Wow.
Which is super creepy. His dad goes back the next day and finds this massive footprint in the mud. One of the families says they're sitting there watching TV one night, and they look up, they're on the ground floor, and they see like legs and the bottom half of a torso outside the window. And they freak out and run upstairs where this alien is like looking in the window of their daughter's bedroom. Like,
wow,
fucking wild. But because nothing is ever simple or easy, one of the people in the documentary is like, yeah, I was like talking to people about this, like, and my wife was like, oh, I've seen that suit. He's like, what are you talking about? She's like, yeah, it's in the window of this like supply shop downtown. And he goes down there, and it is a firefighter's suit. And it's, you know, one of those like reflective bunny suits with a black faceplate. So there's no face. You can't see their face. You just see a silver thing. And then someone comes out and claims credit for hoaxing the neighborhood by saying he got one of these suits and was walking around, and in fact describes having to dive in a bush to avoid getting shot by a grandma with a shotgun.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
But of course, nothing's ever simple.
Yeah.
That dude claims to have started pulling this hoax after the newspaper reports started about silver faceless aliens. He is obviously not 8 feet tall.
Right.
And it, you know, the timeline doesn't quite line up. So who knows? Right. I don't know, but it was an interesting episode. If for no other reason than this was a type of encounter, an alien I had not really heard described anywhere else.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I looked it up. Those suits are expensive. So I wonder if it must have been like the shopkeeper's kid or something, or yoinked it, or I don't know.
I don't know.
So my immediate reaction, since this is Wales, is that this was definitely 3 sheep wearing a firefighter suit.
Yeah, totally. 3 sheep in a silver suit.
Yep.
Fucking with the community.
Yep.
So the last episode of the show was arguably the most interesting. It was called Lights Over Fukushima. Chuck, you may or may not know this, but after the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster, many people reported seeing UFOs, bright lights, etc. And the episode talks about how the Japanese culture around UFOs is a little different than the Western culture around it.
Would make sense.
They just seem to be a little more uncomfortable with not knowing things. Something weird happens, and the Japanese culture doesn't necessarily feel like, well, we have to get to the bottom of this and find the... They're like, yeah, weird shit happens. I don't know.
Oh, they're more comfortable. Okay. Got it.
More comfortable. Yeah. They talked to a Buddhist monk who lives and works at the temple in the area, which is known for being a UFO sighting hotspot. He's like, yeah, we see UFOs all the time. They speak with one guy who is a member of the emergency crew who was going into the area after it was evacuated and both looking for survivors, but also recovering bodies. And he tells, I found this story to be fascinating. He tells the story of seeing lights, but he said, noticeably, these lights would be hovering over spots where we would find bodies. And he kind of points at a car abandoned nearby. He's like, for example, you would see a light hovering over the driver's side of the car, and we would come up and there would be a body in the driver's seat, and then the light would go away. Like, and he didn't try to say what it was.
Yeah.
There was a strong implication that maybe this was the spirits of the dead guiding you to their bodies. But there was also, like, was this some third agency, like, leading you to the bodies that needed to be
certainly
taken
handy
away? Like, unclear.
Yeah.
They also talked to some nutty people. They talked to a lady who speaks in UFO language. She just suddenly starts like babbling in tongues.
Okay.
They never really explained who this guy was. I think he's a like manga studies student.
Okay. I'm sure
he talked a lot about the history of aliens and UFOs as viewed through anime and manga, and talking about Ultraman and Wonder Boy and things like that as kind of like post World War II Japanese culture having to kind of assimilate the horror of the atom bomb, but also the usefulness of nuclear power and the weird duality there, and how it kind of resulted in a weird culture that is able to kind of view something as simultaneously monstrous and useful.
Right.
Anyway, it was a very strange episode because it leaned very heavily into the cultural context. But I thought the story about the lights was really interesting. They also included some footage that the UFO community had not seen, even though it is not new, which is these very unusual lights in the sky, which mark against them. The lights are all in a very straight line. It's well above the horizon, but the lights kind of like drip off of it and kind of like float down, but then they'll come back up and coalesce. It was a very unusual thing. They played the clip over and over in the episode. It's worth watching, honestly, just to see that clip. But unlike the other ones, nobody was like, yes, there were aliens at Fukushima. It was more like they talked about the known interest of UFOs in nuclear facilities throughout the world, and how, given that context, if you are a believer in UFOs, it's not surprising that they might have been at a big nuclear disaster.
Yeah. This one's a little harder for me to believe, if I'm honest. I've read some books about astronauts talking about how they'll see lights or flashes or whatever from cosmic rays hitting their optic nerve. That's the current theory, at least. But when I was looking into it, there was also found a paper that talked about this happening during radiation therapy as well. And so I kind of wonder if like Fukushima is not it's not a nuclear wasteland like Chernobyl.
No.
But there's plenty. And that's got to be mentally and physically exhausting work. Like I feel like if I were in that, I'd be primed for anything. Like, I don't even know.
Yeah. This was easily one of the strangest of the videos because they showed the footage of UFOs being recorded around the disaster, but then they did not talk to any of the people who were there, who saw those lights, who recorded that footage. They talked to other people who told related stories and tried to place it in a broader Japanese cultural context. Yeah. So yeah, I'm totally with you. And I don't blame you for finding this. Like you said, it is hard to deny that there is radiation in the area, and we know radiation does weird stuff to human bodies. So, I don't know. It was just an interesting episode.
Yeah. So you watched all these. What was your feeling at the end? Like, should I go watch these? Was it, I don't know. Was it a good romp?
Yeah, it's a good question. So to kind of tie back to the beginning, right? Yeah. Like the UFO community kind of has two fears about documentaries. Yeah. One is that there's nothing new.
Right.
That's not the case here. There's some new information. It was pretty interesting. There's even new information about the Ariel School, which is extremely well documented at this point. And two, the fear is that the topic will either not be taken seriously or will be kind of presented in a skeptical, debunky kind of light.
Right.
That's definitely not the case. If anything, I almost feel like they were a little too hands-off.
Oh.
It was really focused on talking to witnesses and letting them tell their story.
Right.
And where possible, they gave context, so it was really helpful in like the East Texas episode to have them pull up the map and show this sighting was here, this sighting was here, and the radar track showed them going around. They did the same thing with the Welsh sighting. These 3 different families all reported seeing a saucer, and it all moved. And 2 of them were able to triangulate it. They saw it at the same time and called each other on the phone. Are you seeing this? Yes, I'm seeing it. And they had 2 different views of this spot where it went out to sea, and perhaps flew into this island in the area.
Wow.
So all that to say, yeah, I think it's worth watching. It is not badly made by any means. I don't think it's going to convince anybody. But if you're already interested in the topic, it presents 4 interesting stories in a fairly non-judgmental, non-determinative way.
Okay. I mean, if you're looking for new content on Netflix, maybe this is it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's only 4 episodes, so it's a low commitment.
Right, yeah. It's a nice little romp.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Oh man. All right, so that concludes my book reports.
Well, your grades will be in the mail in 3 to 7 days.
Oh man, I hope I pass.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us on It's a Very Exciting Time. You can find show notes and more on our website, veryexcitingtime.com, as well as links to our social media accounts.
And you can feel free to email us at Chuck or Scott at veryexcitingtime.com. And if you'd like to support the show, please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/veryexcitingtime.
And Chuck, as always, my wife thanks you for listening to me talk about UFOs, so she doesn't have to.